Mike Evans, and he is with the Snohomish tribe, and he has lived in Kent for quite a number of years. He worked for the Kent Fire Department for 30 years. He's retired, and this is a new project that we talked about because I think it's important that the city of Kent and the community understand who is here in our area first, and we have not really addressed that subject to give a lot of information to the community. So Mike was very willing to let's do something about this, and so he is going to be putting together carving out a friendship figure that will be put here on the grounds of the museum so the community understands what that means and how it represents the native peoples that lived in our area. So, Mike Evans.
So my native name is Dida Halkade. Dida Halkade Teedstup. I am Snohomish, Stohobschut. So I live here nearby, worked here nearby for quite a few years. But my name and reputation has gone out, and one of the Canoe family members had a relative that had a blowdown, and so it uprooted and blew over. So they knew that I dealt with cedar and little trinkets and carving and things like that. So they offered it to us, and so I took them on it. It came from a hillside just north of Dumas Bay on the Puget Sound, and it was Karen Condos's relative that did that for us. I was planning on carving a welcome figure and doing it at the Edmonds Community College, but the travel time, I just couldn't get enough time working up there by myself, and the travel time was too great. So I was looking for another place a little closer to home, and I had this idea that I was going to carve more than one anyway. So the second choice was the Kent Museum, and so I swapped positions with them. So I still plan on doing one for Edmonds at some point in the future, but this one gets to come first, a little closer to home, where I can spend more time on it, a little more free time. And especially with COVID now, they've got the campus tied up pretty tight. Even the keeper of the kitchen, not the kitchen, the greenhouse. She has to spend time taking care of the greenhouse, especially in the fall. So she's got like 3 or 4 helpers. 2 of them aren't doing anything. They've quit. The other 2, they get about 10 hours and they can't be on the same spot at the same time. He's been one of our drivers and support people. Pushed him into canoe paddling and a few other things. Next to him is Carlos Valdez. He is native from Mexico, maybe undocumented, I don't know. He's not been able to tell me, but a lot of the Mexican people chose to say they were Spanish so that they would be able to live, because if you were native, you were whatever the federal government said, you followed, and that is no good Indian except a dead one. And so that's what happened to them. The Japanese were pushed into servitude, the Filipinos, everybody, the blacks from Africa, they were pushed into servitude, but they couldn't do that with the native people, and so they got rid of them. And that happened all the way up until 1920s, and probably even in the mid-30s. If you were found out at night, oftentimes you were dead. And so if you said you were Spanish, they might have left you alone. So everybody said they were Spanish, even though they were native. And so some of that history is kind of lost. But if I think you do the DNA research, you'll find that there's Native American in with that Spanish. So, and Carlos has been with us, what, 2 years? And I've been with the canoe family since '95, so that makes it almost 25 years. So I guess I'm the senior. We don't call them seniors, we call them elders. And there's a second definition of elder, and that is teacher. And so I am both older and I am the teacher. And so I am doubly elder. So I really am an elder. And I only in the last couple of years have I been pressing that issue to the point where I would, if they said elders first, I would go ahead with that group. Before I would wait with the pullers and do that. But with all the gray hair or none at all, and my age and experience, I was taking that privileged spot of being an elder. They get the first food, they get the best food, and that's the way it should be. And then the workers usually came second, and then everybody else was third. So elders first, and then sometimes they would say canoe family and pullers second, and then guests and everybody else was third. And one of the first things that we're going to need to do is remove what we call the green wood. The green wood comes off first, and that's as opposed to the darker colored wood. The green wood is the new growth, and it is without the creosote, the wood preserver that is normally found in red cedar. And it would rot very, very quickly. Within a matter of a couple years, the green wood's going to be gone. And if you look elsewhere, you see that's already started. It started to rot a little bit in spots. It's not a perfect tree, and because you can see the rot in the middle, and a lot of trees do that. The new growth is on the outside, but the middle has quit growing. And so the tree becomes a tube when inside, and the bugs get in it, and then it starts to rot, and which is why some of the trees don't last very long or have rot in the middle. So this one has a kind of a split, and it'll be just fine for what we're doing. We'll carve that split into a real and make kind of almost a complete tube, but with one split in it. And that'll help in the curing process, so that what is left is thinner and dries more evenly, so it won't crack as much. And so it's that'd be about the second thing we do, is carve that split in it. So I've got a couple canoe family members with me today. They travel with me in the canoe in the summertime, but with COVID, we didn't have that opportunity at all this year. This coming year is planned. We've already had meetings regarding it, and it's going to be a big thing. And we'll be traveling, probably starting from Everett, maybe Tulalip, maybe at Edmonds itself, as kind of a practice day. And then there's 2 weeks of canoe travel, and then a week at the host destination. So we'll be gone for 3 weeks and be on the water for 2 of those. We'll be going about 230 miles in the 2 weeks. So it's not an easy thing. It's something that takes a greater part of the day. We camp at village sites, travel during the day, come ashore, and they welcome us, and they give us a place to camp, potentially to sing and dance. Some of them get rest, the others get to sing and dance until the wee hours, and then 2 hours before daybreak, we get up and do it all over again. So it's, if you do the math, that's not a lot of sleep for some people. So it's real and it's fun. Sometimes it's not real fun, but it's always interesting, and it's something that is near and dear to my heart, and something that I've done for well over 20 years. So this is a new project.
So I have a question about your project.
Carving a welcome figure is a new activity for me. In the Puget Sound area, there was no such thing as totems prior to the Europeans arriving, the pioneers. So the indigenous population did not have totems in this area, not anywhere in the Puget Sound. They were coming from the north, and they got down about halfway of Vancouver Island when they were flooded with the oncoming people, the pioneers. But they did have a welcome figure on the beach. So this is representing of the welcome figure on the beach with their hands up, palms facing them with the back of the hands out and hands raised, which is a welcome gesture. And so the welcome figure was on the beach. House posts may have had some spiritual helpers carved into them, but they did not have what we call totem poles. Totem poles is basically a misnomer. They come in 3 different types. One is a clan, so you had father and mother side, and then each of those had their father and mother's side. So there was 4 figures on a clan pole, and it depicted who they were based on that lineage. Second of all, it could be a memorial pole, remembering some great chief or some high-class person that was to be memorialized. When there was anybody left around to remember it, it was allowed to go to rot, fall down and rot. So a lot of those older poles are gone because the memory of that person is gone, and it goes with them. The third one is a story. So typically, if you're telling a story, then at the end of this story, there would be somebody, a high chief, that would have a potlatch, a giveaway, and he would be at the top of the figure. So he would be the last in this line. So the most important person in this story would be the one at the bottom. So being top man on the pole was not a good thing. You weren't the most important, and you weren't the beginning. You were as something that happened at the end. So there's a lot more to all of that, but that's, instead of a totem pole, we're carving a welcome figure. You had a question?
I do have a question. You are going to be so busy this summer.
I was until COVID hit.
Yes. So what do you, the time frame on this?
I planned on going fairly slow so that we made it more of an event where we could talk about it. And originally I was thinking it was going to take me 9 months because of that. And now 6 of them are gone. So in the wintertime, I'm going to go ahead and start doing that particular carving off the greenwood. So we can do that now. And then in the springtime, hopefully we'll be out of the isolation enough so we can have a small gathering of at least a couple people, and then we could talk about it. Maybe a whole class or a family come together, family school event, come do and we can do it now, but there's just nobody here, and it's starting to get cold, and there's not a lot of people. But if we do the publicity and do it enough ahead of time, then in the springtime that would be a big thing, and we could do just like what we did here put down a tarp to collect everything, and then all the carver's leftovers, the carver always takes care of those. It's his job and his responsibility. So the bigger pieces we can give away as remembrances that they were here and helping, and maybe they get to whack on the log at certain places and a little bit, and they get to take home a piece of it. Is part of it. And then we can always produce documents and stories about the native people in this area. They basically owned this land. It was theirs before the white person come by and says, oh no, it's ours now. And without ceremony and without any exchange of gifts or anything, they just came and took control in a lot of cases. The people in here were, the closest village was on the river, and they had villages on the rivers because of the abundance of food, lots of salmon, and 2, transportation. So what happens in communities where that's needed? They need transportation and they need food, and villages end up around that, and those are your hubs. I-5, state routes like the one in front of the Kent Museum is a state route, and so you see food places along the way, you see stores along the way, and basically this was their way of doing exactly the same thing along the rivers. And the closest one, there were 2 villages here in Kent. One was called Tuck, and to make that into a noun you put an S in front of it, and Tuck means blocked or jammed, and it was referring to a log jam. It may have been already cleared about the time the first pioneers arrived. The village was vacated about that same time, and Van Dorens moved into this vacated spot that already had the trees cleared, and it was a nice spot for a village. In fact, it was the 2nd largest village of the Duwamish people, and it was called Tuck, or if you put an S in front of it, stuck. And then Obj at the end means people of. So Stuck Obj. Almost sounds like Sasquatch. Stuck Obj. And that was the logjam people. The next village was Sutsabal, and that was called Flea House. And it had a story about fleeing elk. And Tuck had a story about snakes. And if you go to the Green River Valley today, which had its name changed from White River to Green, you'll find that there are very large gardener snakes still in that area. And this is, and it's recorded in, both of these are recorded in Arthur C. Ballard's book, Mythology of Southern Puget Sound by Arthur C. Ballard. So you can see those stories. It's preserved for us. It's copyrighted, and that's where some of these stories come from, is books like that. Any other questions?
That's for right now, no. I'm just really curious to start watching you do what you do.
A little bit at a time, and you'll see it develop. Okay? And we can take more pictures later on. But today I want to get them to come and put their hands on it. They can communicate to the tree, send it good thoughts and messages, so that when we start carving on it, we don't get hurt, and the tree that's getting carved is acceptable. That's because it knows our hearts. So we'll do that sort of thing. You have a question back here?
Many, but I'll just limit myself on right now. Can I take a picture of that? Or
Yes. It's not necessarily religious, but it is spiritual.
Right.
So it's talking about the spirit of the cedar tree, our spirits, and the connection between them. And if you want to talk more about that, you can start talking about the DNA that's in the trees comes from the soil. The people that were here died and contributed to that DNA that's in the trees. So the people, the native people, are in the trees today. So it's in this one. We need to talk to it. We need to ask permission. We need to send our good thoughts. And then we'll have, when we're done, we'll have something that looks good and is good.